Hi, dear friends, before you start the story, write where you are watching us from and subscribe to the channel. We really need your support. Since childhood, I have been obsessed with the idea of financial independence. While others dreamed of becoming athletes or artists, I read books about money and investments with rapt attention. My parents ran a small but stable business. We weren't rich, but I always felt secure. When I went to a private university in Germany, my financial situation was in stark contrast to what I saw around me. New Mercedes, watches for thousands of euros, vacations in Dubai. This was the reality of my classmates. I didn't feel envy, rather a challenge. I realized, if I wanted to be among them, I had to build it myself. I delved into the study of investments. 6 months into my studies, after reading dozens of books, articles, and talking to professors, I invested everything I had, $7,000, in Tesla stock. It was scary, but within a month, my account started to grow. That feeling when you see money working for you is impossible to forget. I realized I needed more capital, and then I decided to turn to my parents. I didn't want to just ask for money. I approached it like a business. I made a presentation, outlined my forecasts, showed the market dynamics and my strategy. I knew it wasn't a game. It's a responsibility, especially when it's your family's money. We sat down at the table in the living room. I turned on my laptop and put the graphs on the screen. My parents listened attentively, with slight disbelief, but also with pride. I could see it in their eyes. After half an hour of explanation, questions, and discussion, they agreed to give me $10,000. I promised that I would take the money as seriously as possible. I invested it immediately. And again, growth. I started making money. A couple months later, seeing my results, my parents offered to give me more, already without presentations. We moved on to trust. In total, they invested $80,000. It was their savings. Money they could have spent on renovations, vacations, just a quiet old age. Instead, they entrusted it to me. I felt immense gratitude, but I also felt pressure building. I had no right to be wrong. Things were going so well that at times it felt like I was living someone else's dream. The portfolio was growing. I got up in the morning, checked charts, did analysis, consulted with professors. My university friends went to parties. I sat in the library, in Excel and Bloomberg. I was enjoying it. 6 months later, when the result became obvious, my parents offered to invest some more, this time $115,000. It was all of their savings. Absolutely everything. I remember my mom saying, "If I'm going to take a risk, it's with you. We believe." And I took it like a vow. My insides clenched. It wasn't just faith. It was their life entrusted to me. I knew what I was doing, but the pressure built up. My days now began not with coffee, but with excitement. I got less sleep, read more, laughed less often. Everything was at stake. My mentor at the university, an elderly professor with a background in investments, had been supporting me the whole time. He was impressed, but also concerned. He said, "Money is the litmus. It will show everything. You need to know what you agreed to in the family, clearly, in writing, before it's too late." I thought about my mentor's words for a long time. He was right. My parents and I hadn't signed anything, no contracts, no official terms. It was all about trust. On the one hand, they were family. On the other hand, it was serious money and serious risks. I decided I couldn't put it off any longer. We set up a meeting at home, but my father couldn't make it that day. Only my mother was there. We sat in the kitchen and I told her how I felt. That I live under pressure every day, that I'm afraid for our relationship, and that we need to make a deal while things are calm. I offered, after the sale, 50% to me, 50% to my parents. They gave the capital, but I do all the work, every day without weekends. Mom was silent for a long time. I could see her struggling with her emotions. Finally, she nodded, said it was fair. that she was proud of me, that we were family, and we wouldn't fight over money. I believed her. That conversation reassured me. I felt like it was right. It's fair. By the time we talked to my mom, the portfolio had already passed $1 million. Every day it went up, sometimes by several $1,000s in an hour. At one point, it reached $1.4 million. I could hardly believe it. I was at my peak. 24 years old and on the screen, an amount I had only dreamed of before. I started making plans, buying a house, a nice car, starting my own fund, investing in startups. I felt that now I could start my life from another level. All thanks to work, discipline, and of course, my parents. My mom and I never brought up the subject of sharing again, as if the arrangement was fixed. Dad didn't ask anything, but I was sure Mom had told him everything. That meant he was okay with it. I even began to think about giving them back some of the capital before the sale, just out of gratitude. I didn't want to be that son who forgets who helped him. But at the time, I didn't know it yet. The hardest part wasn't making that money. The hardest part was ahead. After the account reached $1.4 million, a market correction began. At first slow, then sharp. Amid news, global uncertainty, and geopolitical conflicts, stocks began to fall. I held on. I knew. The market is waves, but an uneasy feeling was already starting to curl up inside. The account sagged to 900,000, then 700,000, and finally, 650,000. It was a blow. Not because I wasn't prepared, I was. It was because I could feel the attitudes around me changing. My parents stopped being interested in my business. Gone was the pride, the enthusiasm. I could hear the coldness in my father's voice. You said you had everything under control. But the briefcase began to recover little by little. I believed, and continue to believe, that long-term it will all come back. It just takes patience. What I didn't expect was that the next blow wouldn't come from the market, but from my own family. It was an ordinary evening. My family and I were having dinner, talking. Everything seemed calm. My car was being repaired, and my mom offered me a ride home. On the ride, she was quiet, not as usual. I sensed the tension but didn't ask right away. After a couple minutes, she spoke up on her own. "What are your plans for the money? When do you, decide to sell?" I started to tell her about the house, the car, the investments. It was a little awkward, but I thought she was just interested. Suddenly, she laughed. "You think you can afford all that with your 100 grand?" I didn't understand. I asked again. "How much?" 100,000. That's your share. The rest is ours. And my brother and sister, 100 each. It's all fair." I was sitting there like I was on ice. At first I thought she was joking, but she wasn't. She was serious. Word by word, explaining how everything was done with family money, how you were just a performer, how you're young, you're still growing up. I couldn't breathe. Mom spoke calmly, almost coldly. It was as if she were discussing something that had been decided long ago. I tried to get a word in, to explain, to remind myself of our conversation, of the 50-50 agreement. She shook her head. "I just wanted to cheer you up then. You were on edge. It didn't mean anything. We're family. We share the money." I could feel it all crumbling inside. I didn't just put time, effort, and knowledge into this. I lived it, for years. I lived for this goal, for the moment when I could say, I did it. I told her, "Stop the car." "What?" "Stop it." Now she pulled over to the curb. I got out, slammed the door, and walked away. It was a quiet suburban neighborhood. I walked in the dark a few kilometers home. No lights, no music. Just thoughts, heavy as concrete. I couldn't believe this was happening. Not to someone else. To me. To my family. The next day I couldn't get out of bed. Not because I was sick, I just didn't see the point. It was like I'd been disconnected. My phone buzzed. My mom was texting, calling. I didn't answer. A day later, my dad texted, "We need to talk. You're overreacting." But I didn't feel overreacting. I felt betrayed. Everything we'd built together, trust, honesty, partnership, was one-sided. It took me a long time to make up my mind, but then I wrote to my mentor. I apologized, said that I hadn't listened to him, that I hadn't formalized the contract. He wrote back almost immediately, "You didn't let me down. You trusted too much. It's a mistake, but not a failure. Get stronger. You know what to do." Those words gave me a little bit of my footing back. I began to think soberly. We don't have a contract, but we have correspondence, screenshots, translations. Can this be used? Or is it completely lost?
I found a lawyer, just to talk. No trial plans. He listened to me, went through transfers, correspondence, notes, even a message from my mum after our arrangement. He said, "It's not reinforced concrete, but you've got a point. Especially when it comes to pressure, moral obligations, and the fact that you were the primary manager." But he immediately added, "Before you go the legal route, talk, once, maturely, without emotion, calmly." I agreed. I went to my parents' house that weekend. No anger. I put the brokerage account statement on the table, my notes, the records of our investments. I said, "I love you, but if we don't work this out honestly, I can't stay in the family." Not because of the money, it was the betrayal. It was hard. Mum cried. Dad wouldn't talk. But in the end, we made a deal. 50-50, in writing, with a notary. I'm still rebuilding the briefcase. But I can sleep easy now, because I did the right thing, to the end.